Welcome to Unlocking Your Truth, another podcast by Dr. Lesley Phillips.
Welcome to Unlocking Your Truth, listeners. You are tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley and Corey.
Hello, everyone.
On this fine Tuesday evening, 7 o'clock Pacific time, across the Fraser Valley, and broadcasting live from the unceded territory of the Stolo Nation. And we're broadcasting on 101.7 FM. And we're also live streaming on our Facebook group, which is called the Awaken Your Psychic Abilities Facebook group. If you are not a member of that group yet,
Hello, everyone.
and you would like to watch us produce the radio show, then go ahead, go onto Facebook, search for the Awaken Your Psychic Abilities Facebook group and request to join.
And you can ask all the questions you want.
You can. Yeah. We just love interacting with our audience that way. It makes it really easy for everybody. Well, in the last little while on the live shows, we've been doing a series about psychic abilities. And of course, Unlocking Your Truth is a talk show about metaphysics and spirituality. And in the first three parts of this series, we talked about 22 different psychic abilities and their relationship with the chakra system. And actually there was a bit of discussion on the Facebook group about psychic abilities and different names for different psychic abilities. And there were some that were listed that I didn't mention when I talked about the 22 psychic abilities. And there was a reason why I didn't mention them. And we're going to cover those today. And so I guess the theme of this part 4 to that series is going to be about experiences that we have that seem like a psychic experience, and actually maybe they are, but they're not a genuine psychic ability in the way that I would define it. So maybe I should just start with how I would define a psychic ability. So to me, a psychic ability it's a spiritual sense. It is, if you were not living in a physical body and you were existing as pure consciousness and as pure spirit, you would still have that way of sensing reality. So for example, if you were not in a physical body, but you were out there in the great all that is experiencing reality, you would be able to tune into energy frequencies in different ways. One would be with your clairvoyance. One would be with your clairaudience, for example. They are both ways of tuning into energy waves and energy frequencies. And they are also, when you're in the body, channeled through the chakra system. So my definition for something that is a genuine spiritual sense is something that, yes, you can access it through the body, through the chakra system, but also, if you weren't to have a body, you would still be able to use that sense, that way of sensing. So then hopefully that's clear to everybody what I'm meaning by that. But in the Facebook group, if you need further clarification, just ask questions. So I'm going to go through the list of psychic abilities that were posted on the group, and we'll talk about them a little bit. So you'll notice that in the last few weeks we talked about being able to see, being able to hear, being able to feel or tune into the emotions. So we talked about psychic seeing and psychic hearing and, in a sense, psychic feeling. But we didn't talk about psychic smelling and psychic tasting. And if you Google, you will find people talking about those as psychic abilities, and there are different names for them. So clear smelling is sometimes referred to as Clairaudience, and it's also sometimes referred to as Clairolfaction. And the classic example is, I don't know, let's say you have some relatives that have passed away, and you intuit when they're visiting you because you can smell Uncle John's cigar smoke in the room, even though nobody's there smoking a cigar. Or you can smell Auntie Peggy's perfume that she used to wear when she was alive. And a lot of mediums, or even sort of ghost hunter type people, will tune into different smells as a way of reading energy. Why is that different to the psychic abilities that I talked about in the previous episodes?
That's a good question.
It's different because what's happening, think about what's happening is that spirit is stimulating the physical sense. Spirit is stimulating the physical sense. So you're having an experience of a smell when a smell isn't there, but it's being stimulated by spirit. A genuine psychic ability is it's not a body level that's being stimulated by spirit. So in clairvoyance, you've not got spirit coming and interfering with your visual cortex in your brain, or making you see things with your physical eyes. You're actually seeing with your third eye. It's a genuine psychic ability. But if you're smelling stuff, then spirit is stimulating the apparatus in the physical body to have that experience. And that's why it's different. It doesn't mean that there's not a genuine experience with spirit, but what it does mean is that there is kind of like an invasion of space of the person having the experience. And so let's see if we can explain that a bit further. Let's say I can, with my clairvoyance, I can see dead Uncle Henry. Right? There he is. He's in the room. I'm seeing him with my third eye, and he doesn't have to come anywhere near my energy field for me to see him, because I'm seeing him with my genuine psychic sense. If I smell Uncle Henry's cigars, then Uncle Henry, or possibly somebody else, has come along and interfered in my energetic space to stimulate my sense of smell in some way. And that's the difference. So there's even, another one which relates to tasting as spirit, called Claircognizance. That's the only name that I've heard it called. There might be other names for it, I'm not sure. And that is the sense of spirit, sort of spiritual tasting. And again, it's a bit rarer, I think, but I've heard of examples of healers, for example, who might be giving somebody a reading about their health, and they might taste what that person needs to eat to improve their health. Or they might taste what is causing a problem for that person. But once again, in this case, you're dealing with stimulation of the physical sense of taste by spirit. So maybe that healer is working with a spirit guide that doesn't necessarily respect space, and the way that that spirit guide sends a message is to interfere with the taste organs or sense of taste in the brain and the physical system of the person. Is Is there a question?
Yeah, there is actually, and it's a question about healing. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have asked you.
Yeah.
And it might have something to do with what we're talking about.
Okay.
It's from someone named Susie. And Susie is going to have some chemo and radiation for stage 2 cervical cancer. She's having a hard time emotionally and trying different alternative healing modalities. Could you see any additional information that may help her?
Okay, so stage 2 cancer.
Yeah, cervical cancer.
Cervical cancer.
And she's starting chemo tomorrow.
Okay, and she's looking for some other alternative complementary therapies that can support the experience?
Yeah, for her emotions and for the healing, I guess, of her.
Okay, well, let's take a look. Is that somebody that just phoned us up?
It's actually a friend asked the question for her.
Okay.
She's not able to cut to the phone, so it's a
Okay.
friend of someone.
Okay. So, the first thing that I'm picking up is that Susie's, one of the things that is, it's like she's feeling helpless. Like she hasn't got any control over her life, her situation, you know, that other people, the experts, are the ones that are sort of it's in their hands. It's in their hands, it's in God's hands, it's, you know, what that. And so I'm seeing that sense of helplessness and lack of control from a spiritual perspective. It's actually not correct. Often when we go through difficult times in our life, it feels like that to us. But ultimately, you do have an influence, and the influence starts with, ultimately wanting to recover. And everyone would say, well, of course, I want to recover. On a higher spiritual level, wanting to recover, in that sometimes as spirit we create an illness because there's some kind of benefit to us going through that experience, some kind of expansion and growth that can happen. And then number 2 is like believing that you will get better, that change is possible, and that change is possible, but you have to believe it in order for you to be able to receive it, accept it, and allow it to happen. Okay, and I'm giving you a little bit of a healing while we're talking, and so she said she's exploring alternate modalities. So I don't know that I would recommend a specific modality, but what I would say is working with an energy healer who is able to work with that energy and give you a healing, actually like I'm doing right now, but also be able to work with you on your beliefs and get down to the core belief that underpins the physical manifestation. Because under every physical manifestation, there's a core belief that you've held for a long time that eventually has led to the development of an illness. And so that's the way that I work with people is, I can administer energy healing, but also really like to empower them by teaching them how they can work with their own energy and how that they can alter their beliefs. But what I would say, Susie, is the other thing, and you've probably heard this, but it's like ask for help, and ask for help as spirit. Ask that there are so many spiritual helpers that really want to flood in any time any one of us asks for assistance, and so ask for help and allow yourself to receive that help. And one of the things that I'm seeing as well about you and your situation is it looks to me like that you're holding on to some well, there's some fear. Of course, there's fear when you've got a condition like cancer. But it looks like you're also holding on to a lot of energy from the past. And so it looks like to me that the healing process would involve helping you to feel more empowered, let go, get yourself out of fear, but also release and let go of energy from the past. So I hope that that's helpful, Susie. You're welcome to take a look at my website and look at the healing work that I do.
A couple of things that we've run into, some situations that are very interesting and compatible. And one of the things is eliminate sugar and starches from your life, because that's what the cancer lives on, as well as fear on a physical sense. But we met with somebody in the past couple of months who's had two friends who did they boiled some asparagus. It was asparagus.
That's right.
Yeah, they boiled some asparagus, and then every day, and they kept the water and the asparagus. And what was it? They took a tablespoon before each meal, or what?
Something like that. I'm sure if you Google it, you could probably find it.
And apparently, there are two situations of people actually going in for X-rays later on, and the cysts shrank.
Yeah, it shrank. Yeah, that's a good one, Corey. Yeah. I mean, we haven't tried that ourselves, but we've met somebody who absolutely swore by it as being having some compounds in it that really helped.
Yeah, what we can do is we can check with her and see exactly what the components were of that.
And post it on the podcast writer.
We can do that.
Good idea.
But again, this is not medical. This is not medical. What's the word? Advice. This is just something that I mean, nature has cures for everything, you know.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, thanks for that question, Susie. And you're listening to Unlocking Your Truth, listeners, and we're actually doing part 4 of a series on psychic abilities. And what I was doing in this show was talking about things that you might have thought of as a genuine psychic ability, but they're not exactly the same as the ones that we talked about in parts 1, 2, and 3. And so we're talking about them and explaining why they're a little bit different. And so we've just in this section of the show talked about Clairaudience or clairolfaction, clear smelling, and Clairgustance, clear tasting, and talked about how what's happening in those instances is spirit is interfering with the physical system of the person, as opposed to it being a genuine psychic sense channeled through the chakra system. And so when we get back, we'll continue talking about that. And I mean, why is it, is one better than the other, and why might that be? I'm always an advocate of owning your own space and not allowing your space to be interfered. And that's kind of why I would say develop the clairvoyance as opposed to clear smelling. All right, we'll be back after these messages. Welcome back, listeners. You're tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley and Corey. And this is the 4th episode in our series about psychic abilities that we're doing this summer. And tonight's episode, we're talking about sort of like different experiences that you can have, and are they a genuine psychic ability, or is something else going on? And some of the other ones that were listed in our Facebook group as being sort of specific psychic abilities, I'm going to talk about them now. And one of them was remote viewing. Remote viewing. And in my book, remote viewing is actually clairvoyance. It's another word for clairvoyance and a specific way of using and applying your clairvoyance. So if you are remote viewing, usually what somebody is doing is they are using their third eye, their psychic vision, in order to gather information about events and people at a distance in another location. It's not always the clairvoyance that is used to do that, but quite often it is. So the classic ways that they teach remote viewing, you're using your clairvoyance. Sometimes it can be astral travel. And so the difference is, are you sitting and staying in your body and sitting in the center of your sixth chakra in order to get the images? That's your clairvoyance. Are you leaving the body and traveling as spirit to that location? Then that's an out-of-body experience or astral travel. And so there could be different methods for remote viewing and different abilities that you might use to do the remote viewing. So, but I wouldn't think of that as a separate, distinct ability from those two ones that I mentioned. Okay, and then another one on the same idea of visualizing and seeing things that somebody listed was scrying. And scrying, it's kind of an old-fashioned word, isn't it? And that's where you take a crystal ball or a mirror or a pool of water, and you stare into the limpid pool of water and visions appear, or you stare into the crystal ball and visions appear, or even the Nostradamus method of staring into a candle flame. They're all ways actually of working with your clairvoyance, and all that's happening is that the image that's coming from your clairvoyance, which, you know, if you're trained as a clairvoyant, you've got an imaginary movie screen, basically. You've got kind of a movie screen that the images are being projected onto. And that's how I train my clairvoyant students. You know, they're looking at this movie screen 6 to 8 inches in front of their forehead. What you're actually doing when you're scrying is it's the same thing, except it's sort of projected onto the pool of water, or it's projected into the crystal ball. Or, you know, the mirror.
Oh, that's like Snow White's evil queen when she was looking mirror, mirror on the wall. Who's the fairest of them all? Yeah,
so I would say scrying is another form of clairvoyance. And let's just talk about that a little bit more. Because oftentimes, you know, some people get to believe that the power is in the object. So the power is in the crystal ball, the power is in the mirror, the power is in the deck of tarot cards, you know, that you're playing with, but the power is within the reader. It's the reader's clairvoyance that is receiving the information. It's the reader's psychic abilities that the information is coming through, and those objects are one of two things. They are a device for allowing a person to relax enough and get out of their intellect enough to allow the clairvoyance to flow. So the cards might be an example of that, because there's all the imagery on the cards and the symbols on the cards and the colours on the cards. Or they're actually something that will draw the focus of the person that's being read. So if you've got a crystal ball in the center of the table and you've got a readee the other side of the table, that person that you're reading, their focus is going to be on the fascination of this crystal ball, this amazing thing where magic happens and images come forward. And it deflects the focus of the readee from the clairvoyant to the object. And that is beneficial, because when you're doing a reading of another person, if that person doesn't know how to manage their energy, they have a tendency to project their consciousness and their energy into the energy field of the reader. And that can be distorting and disturbing for the reader if the reader doesn't know how to handle it. So it can make the thing more comfortable for the reader as well, because it's deflecting the person's energy into the object instead of into the reader's energy field and mind.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. All right. So what other ones were on our list? Divination. Divination was on the list, and again, that's another thing using objects usually. We did a show years back, probably 3 years ago, one of the earlier shows we did where it was on divination, and we looked up how many different kinds of things do people use to do divining. And there was a list of like 360 different things, whether it's bird bones that you scatter, or the patterns of the flight of the birds, or the animal tracks, or
whale bones,
the intestines of something, or
runes.
You name it. There were so many different things that people scatter and then read the patterns of. But what is the psychic ability that's being used? I mean, that's the use of an object, a bit like we were talking about a crystal ball or a deck of cards. It's the same thing. There's an object, and then those patterns in the object are being read through the psychic senses. Now, you might say that, okay, well, but there's a synchronicity, or there's something that's happening that's determining how those objects are scattered, and which ones show up in what way. But how the person is reading it is through the psychic senses, such as clairvoyance or claircognizance, or any of the other, some of the other ones that we talked about in episodes 1 to 3 of this show.
Adam says that divination is a big thing where he came from.
Cool.
Where's that, Adam?
But again,
Apache Mountains.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, in sometimes
Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, I think that it can be great, and I've met some people who do divining. Some from the African tradition, and they do amazing readings. But the divination itself is not like a psychic ability in the way I would describe it. They're using their psychic abilities in the divination process, and again, the power isn't in the object, it's in the person doing the reading. So
that's the same with cards and with tiles and tea
leaves. Yeah,
a friend of mine taught me once that you can read cards, you can read like tarot cards, but you can read any type of card. You can even read a deck of playing cards. Yep. And sure enough, she was right. I took a deck of playing cards at a reading for her, and the stuff I got from the playing cards was amazing. Yeah,
you can, and you can you can look at paintings, you can look at patterns in the clouds, patterns in the leaves, patterns in the shadows. There's pretty much anything, really, I guess.
Patterns in the patterns.
Yeah. So another one that was listed was aura reading as a separate psychic ability. And again, that's not a separate psychic ability. It's something that you can do with your psychic ability. You can read an aura with your psychic ability. You can use your clairvoyance to look at an aura and interpret the aura. And then another one was automatic writing. Automatic writing, and actually let's bundle that together with channeling. Automatic writing and channeling. And actually we'll talk about mediumship as well, because these are all somewhat interrelated. So what is happening, what automatic writing is, and also automatic painting, I guess, is that a person sits, with a pen and a pad, and the hand writes, but the mind isn't engaged. It's not the mind of the person that is dictating what's being written. In fact, that person may not even have any awareness of what they're writing. So it may be that they go into a trance-like state, and the writing appears, or the drawing appears. And so some examples of this might be Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsh, or A Course in Miracles, are writings that were channeled writings. Or there are some really interesting and cool artists as well that have done channeled art. There's a Canadian lady, she's not alive anymore, her name was Alma Rumbold, and she was a farmer's wife in the middle of Saskatchewan, not very well educated, not exposed to the sophistication of the rest of the world, and she channeled these amazing paintings that were like Buddhist imagery. And another one is a Swedish artist called Hilma af Klint, and she did paintings that conveyed spiritual information. So there's lots of examples of this kind of thing. And what is happening? It's a form of channeling, and it can be two different things that are happening. So it could be that a higher aspect of the person is being channeled through the person. So it could be coming from this person's, you might think, superconscious or subconscious mind, or their higher mind. Or it could be that they are channeling another being or another entity. And that they're temporarily allowing that being to use their physical body in order to create this communication. And it's a bit like, so again, let's talk about that. Then let's talk about channeling as well, because it's the same thing in a way. So famous channels that you might have heard of are Esther Hicks channeling Abraham, so Abraham Hicks, or Jane Roberts channeling Seth, or Bashar, or there's loads of these different Cryon entities that are channeled through a medium, and these and in these cases that I just mentioned, what is being produced by that interaction is words, is a message, verbally delivered. But it's just this, automatic writing or automatic drawing, or it's automatic speaking. They're all forms of channeling. And like I said, it could be, in the case of Esther Hicks, for example, I believe Abraham is a higher aspect of, it's a group consciousness that she is a part of. It's a higher aspect of herself. But for example, Cryon, who's channeled by Lee Carroll, is a benevolent, high vibration being, but is not a part of the consciousness of Lee Carroll. And so, channeling can be benevolent or non-benevolent. So another type of channeling is possession, where the person is possessed by a non-benevolent being. And so that in itself it's not a psychic ability. It's more a process of allowing an aspect of your own higher consciousness or another being to temporarily use your energy system and your physical body. So that being comes in and kind of takes over, moves the mouth, moves the arms, whatever it is that's going on there. So, and then just before, we've got to go to another break in a couple of minutes, but just on that note, another thing, term that we could talk about is mediumship, because often people think mediumship is a psychic ability in its own right, and being a medium is one thing. But somebody who is a medium, and again, a medium it's kind of like a channel for spirit to come through. A medium can be getting messages in many different ways. So you could go and see a spiritual medium who is on stage, and they're bringing through deceased loved ones for the audience. And then you could, let's say you've got 4 of them in a row, and they're all delivering messages. Each one could be using a different psychic ability in order to deliver the message. One of them could be using their clairvoyance, and they could be seeing the information. They could be seeing the deceased relatives and communicating with them that way. Another one of them could be hearing the voices of the deceased relatives, and that's how they get their information. Another one could just know, using their knowingness and their crown chakra. And another one might get, a feeling. And the first three, depending on, they're using genuine psychic abilities. The one that's feeling, it depends what's happening. Because if they're saying, I've got this tightness in my chest, I can feel my chest squeezing, I think this person died of a heart attack. Well, how are they feeling that in their system? It's the same thing that I was talking about when I was talking about clairgustance and clairolfaction. There's an energy that's entered their energy field that's giving them that experience, causing discomfort in their own body that they can then translate into information that relates to somebody who's in the audience who's knows someone who died of a heart attack. And so I would say the people using the clairs, it's a very clean way of receiving the information where their own space isn't being invaded. The one who is feeling these energies in their own body, that's not such a clean way, because their space is being invaded and used to allow them to feel and sense these things.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I think it's time for another break.
Yes, it is.
Listeners, you're listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley and Corey, part 4 of our Psychic Abilities series this summer. And if you're just tuning in, Unlocking Your Truth is a talk show about metaphysics and spirituality, and we are about to go to a break. Welcome back, listeners. You're tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley and Corey.
Me again.
Talking about psychic abilities this evening, and specifically kind of like clarifying some myths, I guess, or some misunderstandings, or just giving a bit more information and making a distinction between, explaining how some of these things work.
Yeah.
So you said we have a question from Laurie.
Correct. And she asks, I'm currently living in a pretty toxic building with mentally ill people, and others are allowed to smoke, and it seeps into my place. How do I manifest to be in a positive environment with a good flow of energy around spiritually like-minded people?
Okay. Well, I think you've got 2 approaches here that you could take. One of them is to manage the energy of the building that you're in, and to a high vibration. And actually, often if you do that, the people who can't match that vibration move out and you change. And Laurie, I know that you've taken some courses in meditation, and I think you know how to ground a building and how to move gold energy through a building. And so that's one thing that I would suggest you do while you're living in the building that you're living in. And listeners, what I just said to her, I mean, a lot of people, you know how to, use sage to cleanse a space. But there are ways that you can, without, again, not use an object, but just work directly with energy to cleanse a space and raise the vibration in a space. So that's the first thing that I would say to you. And then let's just take a look at the question of manifesting a move to a better place. Well, again, I think we just want to talk about vibration, and we say this a lot on the show, and it can be an answer to so many questions, actually, which is by managing your own vibration. Because whatever vibration you are, the universe sets itself up around you and reflects that vibration back at you. And so the higher that you can keep your own vibration, and the higher that you can keep your just all your energies, including your thoughts and your beliefs and all of that, then the more likely that your environment is going to be enjoyable for you.
You'd be amazed with that because it really does work. You'll find that the higher that you can set your vibration, the people around you will start to feel that without knowing what they're feeling, and you'll be surprised who leaves and who stays.
Yeah, exactly.
It's quite revealing of all those people around you and in the situations you're in at work or whatever, or even in social atmosphere. So Adam has got another one. Adam says, nailed down a symbol that I could use to understand what was going on with someone's thought process. Happened sort of on accident twice, but I saw a pattern, confirmed the information with the individuals. It was very satisfying. Among other new tools I'm beginning to understand and use. This is amongst other new tools I'm beginning to understand. Example of the puzzle pieces that begin to fit together following the reading that he had with you.
Yeah, very, very cool, Adam. And so, yeah. So being able to read symbols is an aspect of the sixth chakra. I call it abstract intuition. And often, we communicate as spirit through energy frequencies, energy vibration, and structured units of electromagnetic energy, which can be in the form of a symbol. And symbols contain a lot of information. Symbols contain multidimensional information. And so communicating with your psychic senses, it's a higher form of communication, and you can have access to a lot more information because it's a multidimensional communication as opposed to our linear thoughts and our linear verbal, communication methods. So I'm not sure there was a question there, but thanks for
but I have a question.
Yeah.
Stimulated by Adam's question. Thank you, Adam.
Great.
I've known people who speak several languages. I'm talking, 8, 9, 10 languages. And what they said usually is that the first 3 languages were the tough ones. And then the rest of them just started to fall in place because there were so many similarities and grammatically and things along those lines. Is that true with psychic abilities as well? I know we're all born with them, but once you start redeveloping your psychic abilities, do they have a tendency to come faster, or are you limited to one, or can they all just sort of start jumping at you?
So you're not limited to one, and I mean the short answer to that is yes, but maybe
I'm looking for the long answer.
But maybe for a different reason, because I think that with somebody who's developing languages, it's like the language center of the brain is it's growing. And that's where the focus of their neurology is, and also a lot of the languages have the same roots, whether it's a Latin language or whatever. But with the psychic abilities, the answer is yes, but it's for a different reason. Because if you're developing your psychic abilities and you've got a good teacher, then what you're doing is you are healing yourself simultaneously to practicing with your psychic abilities. And so what that means is you're clearing your energy field, you're clearing and letting go of your baggage. And so if you can think of your energy field like a container, let's think of it like a vase. So you could have that vase full of air and it would be clear, but you could fill that vase full of mud and you wouldn't be able to see through the vase. So your energy field is a bit like that. So the more you clean up your energy, then the easier it is for you to tune into your intuition, because you've no longer got a dirty filter that you are looking out through. So you can think of your energy field like a filter or a window that you're observing the world through, and actually that the world is observing you through. So the more you clean it up, the more sensitive you become. And like I always recommend developing the clairvoyance first, just because that one gives you neutrality and seniority of the rest of your system. But I think that that for most people, the two that are more common with people and more commonly experienced is the knowing, the claircognizance, and the feeling, the clairsentience. And then to sort of answer the second part of your question, no, you don't just have one, you have many of them. I think it's good to have the clairvoyance as a foundation for everything, because it gives you neutrality. And that's really important when you're healing yourself and when you're dealing with energy and so on.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the Thank you. I was looking at some of the definitions of claircognizance, the four clairs basically, and I was quite amazed at how many of the different symptoms, for the lack of a better term, I guess, I have for each of the four clairs. It was quite interesting, and it wasn't like just there's one little one. Before I met you, I wouldn't have thought of myself as psychic in any real way, shape, or form. But over the years, I think my psychic intuition has developed quite nicely.
Yeah, I think you're very intuitive, actually.
Yeah, I think so too. I knew you were going to say that. I find it, unless we look at it and focus on it, what you focus on grows, right? What you don't focus on stays the same. And I think one of my favorite questions that you get from people, it starts off, I was with a psychic the other day, and they told me that I could be psychic. And I love that. I love that statement, because the answer, of course, is yes. You don't have to be psychic to tell somebody that they're psychic, right?
Yeah, every single one of us is spirit.
Yeah.
We're not the body, we're spirit.
Yeah. Well, we can all do anything. I mean, anything we set our mind to, we can do. So being psychic isn't any different, because we are those special creatures that can create and use the talents that are given us.
Yeah. All right. Well, I got another couple of things that I noted down that I saw people talking about on the Facebook group.
Oh boy.
Clairtangency. So
who?
Clairtangency, and I've seen clairtangency, and it's a word that I think it means exactly the same as psychometry. And we talked about psychometry, and that's the ability to use the hands and the hand chakras to read energy stored in objects. And but I often see people mix it up with clairsentience, because they're both sort of. Clairsentience means clear feeling, but it's relating to the emotions, and not to a sense of touch. And clairtangency, it's also not really a sense of touch, but I've seen it referred, like sometimes people feel a prickle on their head or a touch on their shoulder, and they say, it's my spirit guides communicating with me. So I've seen people refer to that as like a clairtangency, a sense of touch. And again, that's if you're feeling something in your physical, system, then that being is in your space, basically.
Adam just said, that's been my experience. Claircognizance and clairsentience present themselves more often. With those, it's much more about learning to use it deliberately rather than randomly being hit with it.
Exactly.
But that's true for all.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what when you. I mean, basically, I guess is what I'm training people how to do, is how to do it consciously when you want. Yeah.
All right. There's something you said last week about. I think you just repeated it, just touched it. It just went out of my head. What's the one where you feel jewelry?
Psychometry.
Psychometry is a combination of two psychic abilities. The chakras, the one in your hands, and the one in your sixth chakra.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're using two abilities at the same time, though. You're reading and being aware.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got it, huh?
Cool. All right. So, and then another one that people were talking about was psychic surgery.
Ooh. Ooh.
I guess God, we've never done a show on that, have we? I guess we could. But that, to me, if it's something that actually is genuinely healing people and not a scam, then it's energy healing and or telekinesis. So that's the same as, those two psychic abilities that we covered in the first 3 parts. Because you're manipulating energy, you're causing a change or a shift in energy. And if it's happening on the physical level, then I would say that that's telekinesis, really. I remember I gave the example in the show of the difference would be, someone who is working with a kidney stone, if they're using telekinesis, they might be able to dissolve it in situ. Whereas if they're doing energy healing, that might not be an instant change in the physical thing, but working with the energy of it.
Yeah, but I find energy healing is more about movement. It's more about moving something, changing something, altering something, as almost in the physical but not physical, Whereas working with psychic abilities is you're altering the actual aspect of that issue, like you
mean psychic surgery?
Psychic surgery, yeah. even just healing, energy healing. Psychic surgery. You're using different psychic tools. I find them all very interesting. Psychic surgery is something I've never really looked too much about. Well, Adam says. Exactly. This is something I need to know a lot more about energy healing. That is so. Well, Adam, there's a lot of podcasts that we've done on energy healing. My gosh, so many of them.
Yes, go onto the website, drlesleyphillips.com/category/podcast, and then search on healing.
And folks, it looks like it's time to go.
It is time to end our show. It's been fun again being with you here on 101.7 FM on CIVL, broadcasting live across the Fraser Valley. You've been listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley and Corey. We are here every Tuesday from 7 to 8 Pacific time.
And our next show is going to be Swim Day. That's when you bring a pal, a swim buddy.
Oh, yes.
Swim into the psychicness.
Invite your friends. All right, well, we'll see you next time.
Okay, take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to another Unlocking Your Truth podcast by Dr. Lesley Phillips. For more information, go to our website at drlesleyphillips.com. That's drlesleyphillips.com. where you can ask questions or send her an email, and there's many free gifts on there for you as well. You can also find the questions that were asked during this show at the website on our free card reading podcast page, where you'll find a full list of them. Come back again.